Thank you guys for tuning in. This is Bash here bringing you this presentation of bowl projections. And this year's version of the bowl projections are very interesting. I had 82 teams that I projected to be bowl eligible. USC not included, of course, a 5-6 team underdog. Florida State also, Virginia Tech, those teams not included here. I did include some other teams like Purdue. I had Purdue beating Indiana. I had a couple other teams. I had Coastal Carolina and FAU being bowl eligible, but we'll get to them in a bit. Miami, Ohio, out of the MAC. Tennessee beating Vanderbilt, but the winner of that game is kind of similar to the Purdue Indiana game. The winner goes. Yeah, FAU was involved in that. I believe I had Wyoming involved in that. I can't remember, can't recall. Yeah, let's get right into the bowl projections. And this is going to be a fun one. So here's the first game, and I believe this is going to be tremendous to kick off, which, by the way, I did not do the Celebration Bowl because that is not FBS. But Louisiana Tech versus Wyoming, it'll be interesting to see Jamar Smith go up against this defense in Wyoming that is very solid. Nico Evans is a very solid running back as well. On the other side, Wyoming will try to possess the ball in this. And by the way, I'm going to give picks if this were to happen now. I'll definitely give picks as we go along. But as I'm watching the Bears and Vikings game, but anyway, Wyoming also got a freshman quarterback, Tyler Vanderwall, who has struggled all season long and really has struggled to catch some sort of I don't want to necessarily say rhythm, but he just struggled to really pull off the big wins and make the big plays. Wyoming's Conway, by the way, very solid receiver as well. 2 receptions for 4 yards and a big win against Air Force. Vanderwall this season has been very efficient, though. Up and down with his efficiency, though, is what I meant to say. Only 5 passing TDs on the entire year. Granted, this freshman hasn't played in all the games. He's only played in a handful of games, which was... So far, I want to say he played in 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's played in 9 games, only 5 touchdown passes and he's about a 50% passer, a guy to watch for, though. And Jamar Smith is an efficient guy. He comes back as a junior this year and leads Louisiana Tech to a somewhat successful season. Not really the greatest, but definitely second in the loaded Conference USA West above North Texas. Is very, very good for that team, 7-4, especially after how much they lost at the skill positions. So there's that game right there. And this is a ranking show. The Cure Bowl here between SMU and Louisiana. I think SMU kind of gets a favor here. They're better than that. Ben Hicks is a solid quarterback here for SMU, but they seem to run an air raid style, but not stopping too many teams defensively on a consistent basis. They're able to make plays defensively, but on a consistent basis, no. They allowed 50 to UConn, 31 to Houston in a winning effort, granted, and it was enough, 48 to UCF, and 30 in an overtime victory against a struggling Navy team, and finally 46 to North Texas. But on the other hand, you got Louisiana here, who just got bowl eligible this past weekend with a win against South Alabama by 10 points. But this is another team that kind of can struggle defensively. If you take a look at Nunez, the starting quarterback for Louisiana Lafayette, he is trying to surpass 2,000 yards against Louisiana Monroe, the rivals, and we'll talk about them in a bit. But he's under a 2-to-1 ratio in terms of touchdowns and interceptions. So turning the ball over for Nunez is a little bit of a problem for Andre Nunez. But he can also run the ball a little bit too, although the lead rusher is Ragas with 925 yards, while this game is setting up to be a decent matchup. I expect Louisiana to give it their all, but I would go with SMU if this were to be the case. By the way, that last one, I would have picked Wyoming if this is the game. The Las Vegas Bowl, if you can see that, I don't know if you can. Utah State taking on Arizona State, and I think this is an intriguing matchup because Utah State has been an explosive offense all year, and they've been able to do enough defensively to get some wins, barely beating Colorado State this weekend with a Hail Mary in which a foot touched out of bounds for the wide receiver, Preston Williams, I think it was. Utah State, though, with a very solid quarterback in Jordan Love, a nice offense ran under this coaching staff and Matt Wells. But if you look at the other side for Arizona State, their 6-5 record is not indicative of how good this team is. Oh, didn't mean to do that. How good this team is, because you take a look at Arizona State right now, and you got talent scattered. I know Benjamin's just really young, trying to get going. That defense is young, but very solid and talented, and definitely a top-tier defense. And N'Keal Harry is a top prospect, at least a top 3 prospect, but for me, the top prospect in the NFL draft as wide receivers go. And you also got other guys like Darby in there to throw a name out there. Arizona State's got weapons as well. Arizona State just needs to be clicking with Manny Wilkins at the quarterback position. It'll be very interesting to see this ball game play out, though. The Raycom Media Camellia Bowl. Camellia, however you say it. Georgia Southern running that triple option offense out of the Sun Belt Conference. It has caught a lot of fire in the middle of the season. They were able to defeat Appalachian State when Appalachian State got ranked in the AP top 25. But then 2 weeks prior to this last week against Coastal Carolina, they struggled heavily against Louisiana Monroe and Troy. Those teams were able to beat them. But Shai Werts is a solid guy running that triple option. He's still young. I think he's a sophomore this year, if I'm not mistaken. Shai Werts is a very athletic quarterback, though, and is very capable of causing a lot of headaches for Western Michigan and this coaching staff. But if you look at Western Michigan this season, they got a quarterback in theirself in Wasink, which has almost 2,000 yards. In fact, he's 6 yards away from 2,000 and 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, a decent passer of the football. Bellamy also a 1,000-yard rusher, 1,120 yards and 6 touchdowns this year. This is a solid offense for Western Michigan, but I think the thing that really can catch people's eyes is if Western Michigan really gets going, their defense could possibly hold them back. They've allowed a lot of points against the likes of Ball State, Ohio, Toledo, and Bowling Green even, which is having a very bad year out there in Bowling Green, Ohio. So this is an interesting matchup. By the way, I would take Utah State to beat Arizona State in a close one. And this one, I would go ahead and give the nod to Georgia Southern with that triple option. The New Orleans Bowl is going to be San Diego State against Troy, and I think San Diego State's not used to being in the spot, but with Utah State now getting good, you got 3 teams ahead of them that are really good in the Mountain West that could possibly make a lot of noise and make San Diego State, since they are lower now than this year, make San Diego State fall into a lower bowl game, and that's what's going to end up happening. Chapman, a decent quarterback here, runs the system very well for San Diego State. I think San Diego State's biggest obstacle is going to be keeping a balance of rushing and passing the ball. Agnew, is the quarterback here. 1,500 yards through the air, but Juwan Johnson has been kind of the story that we've all forgotten about. And Juwan Johnson really let off the gas pedal after the first couple of games, in which he had very good games against Stanford, in which Johnson ran 458 yards, and also earlier in the season in a win against Arizona State ran for 38 yards. So, but he's fallen off after that. Almost rushing for 300 yards against the two Pac-12 opponents, and not even really hitting his stride. He's though kind of that guy that Johnson is, that player that is really the X factor for San Diego State, and the fact that he did not play in games 5 through 9, in weeks 5 through 9, it really is troubling for San Diego State when he's not on the field. That resulted in a lot of bad losses. Nevada, they probably shouldn't have lost against, and if he was there, he easily would have won that ball game. UNLV was the last time he was out, I believe. Actually, was he out? I think he was actually back for that one. Yeah, he was. But definitely a team to keep an eye on with rushing attacks. But also on the other side, Troy, up and down year for the Trojans, but they're able to really control the Sun Belt late here as they have a Sun Belt championship game against UL Lafayette or Arkansas State or UL Monroe. There's a lot to be decided on the other side of the division or the other side of the conference. But Troy's only lone loss in conference. Actually, they don't have a loss in conference, do they? I don't think they do. Troy has Appalachian State this weekend. That is for the conference or the division title, actually. I thought they already played Appalachian State for some reason. But they did lose to Liberty and Stephen Calvert earlier in the year. Calvert went off on them, and this defense could possibly be a concern at times. They allowed a lot of points to Boise State, and they were able to knock off Nebraska, though, earlier in the season. Both these guys have knocked off previous giants in college football that aren't as good this year as they have been in past years. But nonetheless, I think this should be a good game. But San Diego State's going to win this one with defense possessing the ball and able to establish that run game that they haven't really had on a consistent basis. FIU and USF, Blake Barnett in this one in the Boca Raton Bowl, and I feel like USF is just falling off completely, kind of like Houston without Ed Oliver, but not to the extreme. USF has just hit that window of where they're going to start playing tough opponents, and they could possibly be a 7-5 team before we know it. And Charlie Strong, the head coach there, has some explaining to do. However, this is still a more talented team than FIU, but FIU 6-1 in conference, 8-3 overall, could be heading to the conference championship game if they beat Marshall. As quarterback Morgan, very solid James Morgan this season, 65% passer, 2,500 yards, 26 touchdowns. I think this is easily a team that is built up by Butch Davis in his own, and this is what he wants out of his squad here. However, I just think USF is going to be a little bit too much on the offensive side with Blake Barnett. I got USF winning this one with relative ease. Louisiana Monroe, I told you we were going to come to them in Toledo. Toledo's kind of had a weird year, but I'll get to Toledo in a second and talk about that, as it's kind of uncharacteristic of the Rockets be in this situation. But Louisiana Monroe with quarterback Caleb Evans has really not necessarily turned things around, but looked a lot better this season. Evans is the leading rusher, though, and passing for 2,600 yards so far this season, but turns the ball over a lot with 11 interceptions on the season for Caleb Evans. It's not a very good year for them. Monroe, of course, having a loss against Arkansas State, which is worse than in years past. They upset Georgia Southern, but they really hit their stride late in the season, because early on in the season they started 2-0, but then they dropped 4 games in a row to the likes of Texas A&M, Troy, Georgia State, and Ole Miss. So they went 2-4, then they won 3 in a row, or really 4 in a row, sorry. That's how they got bowl eligible to 6-4, and then Arkansas State beat them this past weekend to get 6-5. And now they got Louisiana in the rivalry game on rivalry week on Saturday, which are both 6-win teams, and we already talked about Louisiana. But let's just go to the other side of this matchup, and that is Toledo in the MAC conference, having a very interesting and odd year, having Peter start late in the year and get going through in the middle of the year, as he's got 1,400 yards, actually nearly 1,400 yards with 14 touchdown passes. Now he's looking a little bit more like a young Logan Woodside. He's only a sophomore, and Logan Woodside was their guy for a while. He just did not get that full-time rep playing in ball games until you hit probably about the Buffalo game. He didn't play in between Buffalo and Bowling Green. And the game between Buffalo and Bowling Green was actually Eastern Michigan. So he didn't play. Instead, they decided to throw in the guy, Mitchell Guadani. But at the end of the day, they just couldn't get things done against the teams like Eastern Michigan, Miami. Even though Toledo has been better this year than their record would show, they've just had a couple of close losses. They held Buffalo to only 31 points, which is an explosive Buffalo offense, and was able to lose to Northern Illinois a couple weeks ago, but was able to go ahead and win against Kent State in a shootout. They don't have much defense. They can play some offense. They don't have much of a defense. I think when it's going to be a shootout, and I think when it gets into a shootout, you got to favor Toledo here because they have more experience in shootout games against top tier opponents, and I think they're going to be able to get it done here in the Frisco Bowl. Really interesting matchup. I'm not quite sure if we're going to see AJ Early back into the game as Johnson stepped in, or last week's leading an overtime win against Southern Miss, and then pretty bad to Texas A&M, only being the second loss Blazers season. But then you look at Houston on the other side. Houston's been up here, and they've been in emotion. Ed Oliver probably won't play in this game. He might not even play the rest of the year. His Houston may be over in terms of a football player of the year. Very quarterback. It's kind of a shame that we might see Houston. It might be an interesting matchup to see this UAB defense, which has been solid late in the year against offense. But I think this is going to be for De'Ara King, Marcus. These guys are pretty good at Houston. I think their record does not show how good they are even without Ed Oliver. Houston winning probably somewhere along that line. The Bahamas Bowl. Makers wanted the Bahamas Bowl. Tennessee State against Miami, and this is kind of a game that I will watch because this is the last game we're going to see for Brent Stockstill in the Blue Raiders uniform. Bahamas, if this does happen, and I can't wait to watch Brent Stock's final time in here. It's been a long year for Brent Stockstill under and head coach Brent Stockstill. But this is also a very interesting matchup if Miami can go ahead and beat Ball State. Up and down Miami team that we at best Western Michigan this past week in overtime. Oh wait, not Miami. I did. Oh, I know that who it was. Buffalo for sure. They was Northern Illinois that they upset. And they almost upset on a very capable team. Just got caught against decently tough opponents, especially in the Buffalo as well, which they are technically like it's Army than Oklahoma. I don't know, but anyway, nonetheless, I'd really like this quarterback. Glenn, that best quarterback since that's high praise. I don't think he's anywhere near big in terms, but he might be the best guy Miami since Ben Roethlisberger. With that being, I think Middle Tennessee all around has better coaching staff. Middle Tennessee State winning. They met is going to be between, and this again going to be a very potent offense led by Jeff Edford and it's just the catalyst of that. And the guy who makes it all happen is McMarion, the Oregon State transfer, which I feel like Oregon State would be in a spot if they were able to keep McMarion around. But Eastern Michigan's no joke either. And that's probably a possible good matchup here. They've kind of got a little bit of a bad roll of the dice. They got a very good defense at Eastern Michigan. And Tyler Uyghurs, he's also an efficient quarterback, only 2 interceptions on the year, running this offense very smoothly for Eastern Michigan. But they don't really move the ball that well. They hold a lot of teams to very little, really able to score on Eastern Michigan this year has been Army. And that's about it. Everyone's projecting San Diego State to 23, Northern Illinois to only 26. Was in 3. They played this season in 2 games, which is a very good experience. In triple overtime against Northern Illinois and overtime against San Diego State. Only 27 in a loss against Western Michigan, 26 against Toledo, 20 against Ball State, 22 in a matchup against 30 is what I referred to earlier. So, yeah, this is not really this defense. They haven't allowed more than is this right? Yeah, they haven't allowed more than 37 points all year, which is near the top defensively in terms of points allowed. I'm just looking at the scoring defense rankings in all college football just because I'm curious about where they rank. Both these defenses are really good. Fresno State's 5th in points allowed. In Eastern Michigan, I cannot find Eastern Michigan, actually. Wow. Eastern Michigan's actually pretty low on this list, but they are 35th. I really like both defenses, though, but I think at the end of the day, the offense is what's going to win it for Fresno State. Marcus McMarion. And we'll see that for sure. Fresno State with probably about a 10-point win. Bowl, Ohio versus Miami. I really like Ohio's Nathan Rourke, lead as a sophomore here, but also he's got Poppy White as wide receiver playing in his last game, and AJ Outlet as well. These are hard, and no one's going to give him a Memphis Tigers with Brady. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this along. Game's a little bit too far. I'm going to go ahead and go with the Ohio Bobcats in this one in a close one. If this happens to be the matchup, I think Ohio's better than the record shows. They could have easily beat Cincinnati, which is a solid team earlier in the year. Give me the Bobcats. Moving on to you, Army, the Armed Forces Bowl, a very intriguing matchup because we've seen defenses struggle against the triple option in the Big 12 at Oklahoma. So this triple option offense is ran very well by Kelly Hopkins, and Jeff Monken always gets things going for the Army. TCU's Gary Patterson is a very solid coach. He got playmakers all around with Jalen Rager, Devontae Turpin, and they got Darius Anderson, and I'm losing. I know Sean Robinson is a running quarterback for sure, but I can't remember the name of that running back. It's very hard to pronounce. Yeah, it'll roll right off the tongue. Oh, I've seen it. Oh, Michael has been playing as of late, though, so it'll be interesting to see if we'll see Michael. I'm going to see Grayson Muhlstein actually came into the game against Baylor at quarterback. Sewo Olanalua. Okay, Sewo Olanalua. I said it once successfully in that. Just call him Sewo. Sewo is a tremendous running back. I never was able to pronounce his name. Sewo Olanalua. There we go. Moving on. Buffalo against Appalachia State. I think Appalachia State is a well-coached team. I think, and they are really good on the defensive side. A wide receiver who's an NFL prospect and a quarterback who is a giant, a crazy. And I'm, of course, referring to Tyree Jackson with the quarterback. He's a tremendously accurate passer. No, he can definitely run the ball. Talking about Anthony Johnson, the wide receiver for Buffalo, which is a very solid wide receiver. Not Buffalo winning this Dollar General by a couple scores. Hawaii pointed that this game is not played on New Year's Eve. I think New Year's though is that on a Sunday? No, it's not. It's on a Monday. I'm very disappointed this is played on Saturday, December 22nd, not New Year's Eve. Very much love watching the Hawaii Bowl with family on Cleveland. But nonetheless, we got a very good matchup here with an explosive offense. They expect Cole McDonald to be back healthy and John Sua healthy. A very good passing game when fully healthy. It is Hawaii, Marshall team, and they're better on the defensive side of the football than we've seen in the past, not allowing too many points against too many teams. They've only, in fact, they were against NC State, allowed 7 against Brian Finley, and that is the most they've allowed all year on the defensive side of the football. With that being said, and they've had a couple. With that being, Dean has an inability to move the ball offensively on a consistent basis. Only 12 passes, 54%, pass, 7 interceptions. I think that will come back to haunt them, and I think Hawaii is going to get their way because they're going to be able to move a little more successfully than some other teams have been able to, and they're going to be able to stop Marshall because of the ineffectiveness of Isaiah Green. I lost my train of thought there. Moving on to the first responder when we get after Christmas, December 26th, North Texas and Mason Fine against BYU and Tanner Mangum, and that is a very intriguing quarterback battle there, or quarterback game of matchups. Quarterbacks, of course, Tanner Mangum going to be playing in, I think Mason Fine's got another year. I can't remember. The way North Texas kind of expected to really carry a load on the shoulders and win the Conference USA this year after coming so close a year ago, but falling to FAU. And they kind of let people down, even though they aren't going to win it. North Texas, because they lost to UAB. On the other hand, you got BYU, who started really hot, looked really good early, beating Arizona and barely losing Cal, beating Wisconsin, but then it got stomped by Washington, and that was the end of having the national spotlight for the rest of his career. He had his first year in as coordinator against Nebraska and the Hail Mary against Boise State, and then he got it early in the senior year, but it faded. And but it's got to happen. I mean, BYU has just really let down a lot of people, especially if you're a Temp fan, Wisconsin fan, because they upset them and then they show up to do nothing in recent weeks. They lost to Boise a few weeks back, and just not pretty. They got Utah this weekend, trying to stay above 500. They will be 6-6 at least, but moving on, because that's the city party. We got Frank Newtile in the Owls of Temple taking on Northern Illinois. I think Northern Illinois is pretty balanced on both sides of the ball. They're one of the better teams, if not the best in the MAC. And they're going up against a team in Temple that just really started off slow, but they got rolling. I think since they got rolling, they're a very good team. Almost beat UCF, beat Cincinnati. I'm going to go ahead and give the advantage big here to Temple. In the quick lane bowl, where they will be filling in for Big Ten teams since the Big Ten to fill. Of course, if Maryland upsets Penn State, that will change. But that's a big if. Boise State in the Cheez-It Bowl. And I think this is very intriguing. A matchup that I've been kind of wanting to see for a little bit of time, because Cal is very hot and cold. They can get as cold as being humiliated against UCLA, but get as hot as pushing Washington rank and beating USC for the first time since 2003. While on the other hand, Boise State's a very similar team. They can get hot and cold, look very cold against Oklahoma State, bounce back and get hot for Fresno State late in the season. I think this is a very interesting game because of that factor. And it will also be interesting to see if we're going to see Rob Bowers finish this year, Brandon McElwain, or anybody else. And Ripon on the other side is just trying to look more efficient as of late. Pro Scouts haven't been impressed with Ripon. Of course, I believe Ripon can come back still, but it's just not looking good for Ripon and Boise State, even though Boise State's been on a tear winning ball game as of late. Duke and Auburn in the Walk-Ons Independence Bowl. And this defensive front for Auburn is dominant, and it's going to be similar to what you saw with Clemson, and Jarrett Stidham's going to be able to move the ball to a little bit of a less of a factor. I doubt we're going to see Joe Giles Harris in the ball game. We'll see Daniel Jones maybe in his last game as a college football player. But the weapons that Duke has on the edge is just not good enough. Deion Jackson's too young at the running back position. And I think that's similar as Clemson was. I got Duke losing this one by 20. Georgia Tech, Purdue. And I think Purdue is going to get it done against Indiana. Of course, the winner of the Indiana-Purdue game is going to go on to a bowl game. Georgia Tech's already clinched that. And, man, can you get more opposites here? And I think I really like this matchup in the Pinstripe Bowl because you got one side, a very triple option team that likes to methodically move the ball down the field with Taquan Marshall. And on the other side, you got David Blau slinging the ball to Rondale Moore and whoever else you can hit, Sparks, and the crew there. I think this is a very intriguing matchup because of that. You can get is Purdue going to force Georgia Tech to get behind early because they will be playing from a deficit in the entire game. I think they will actually do that, and if they can handle that key, then I think Purdue's got to win here in the Pinstripe Bowl to get 7-6 on the season. Texas Bowl is going to be between Oklahoma State and South Carolina. I moved around a lot of things to get this matchup, but here's Taylor Cornelius against Jake Bentley, two guys who are possible prospects in the NFL, dark horse as draft prospects. You got receivers as well with possibly a healthy Deebo Samuel going up against, and no one talked about, and going up against a guy who's kind of caught a lot of stride recently with a lot of big games against Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Texas, and Tylan Wallace. I really like Wallace. He's fun to watch. I think this is a very entertaining game. I think it's a shootout, but at the end of the day, I think Oklahoma State wins this ball game. Mississippi State and NC State. Look, the inability for Mississippi State to move the ball offensively has been a problem, but this defense is dominant. They got Sweat up there. That's a high NFL draft prospect and would probably be higher if it wasn't for defensive linemen being such a big part of this NFL draft. While on the other side, Ryan Finley's another quarterback that people may want to look at as an NFL quarterback. A very solid guy, but he doesn't really have much of a running game with Reggie Gillespie, who's been very lackluster at best this season. But Kelvin Harmon is a solid receiver to watch for in this game as well. I really like Mississippi State, though, in this game because I think they will be able to run the ball on NC State. And if they're able to run the ball and score enough points, their defense is going to stand up and stop NC State. I got Mississippi State winning this ball game in the Music City Bowl. Iowa State and Syracuse in the Camping World Bowl. We're going to see Brock Purdy possibly going up against Eric Dungey. If Eric Dungey is okay, he did leave the game with an injury against Notre Dame, and I hope we do see him for the remainder of the season, or at least get him in a bowl game. Hopefully Syracuse wins, because this bowl game is not happening if Syracuse loses. They will drop, and we might see Boston College here, which I don't know how much I want that. But the ACC really looks crappy right now in terms of and making these bowl projections. I think there was only one conference that I couldn't consider to be in the New Year's Six Bowl, and that was the ACC. I could consider Utah, I could consider Penn State, and I could consider many different teams from the SEC. There would be two from the Big Ten anyway. And the only Power 5 conference I really couldn't consider two was the ACC. Everyone else was the SEC got consideration for 4 teams in the New Year's Six, which would be crazy, but it would actually make bowls being put together a little bit easier for people who do that. With that being said, I don't like this Syracuse defense, and I really like this Iowa State defense. So I think Iowa State has a big mismatch in this game. Iowa State with a big win. And David Montgomery is going to tear up Syracuse's defense. Texas against Utah. I think this is another very intriguing matchup because this is a very good defense in Utah, top 20 defense at the worst, against a Big 12 team that has a lot of wide receivers that are very talented in Colin Johnson, Devin Duvernay, and, of course, Lil Jordan Humphrey. Now, Sam Ehlinger is a solid quarterback, but I think if Utah can get healthy with Zach Moss, they can have a big game on the ground as well. I think a close one in the 30s. Give me Texas. Now we get to the New Year's Six. We are finally here, and we have, I think, 16 more bowl games to hit. This one's going to be UCF versus LSU. Man, is this intriguing as well, because I think LSU has no offense, but they also have a fantastic defense, and they're one of the best defenses in the country. If anyone's going to slow down UCF, it might be this LSU team. But I don't see UCF really having any issues stopping LSU on the other side of the ball. I think this is going to be somewhat similar to the Florida game. Give me UCF. Pitt A&M in the Belk Bowl. I'm starting to fade in Texas A&M. They've looked worse as of late. They have kind of declined as the season's gone on. Kellen Mond just does not look like the same self. And where has Rodgers been lately? Kendrick Rodgers for Texas A&M. I don't know. They've been non-existent. They've also not been great on defense. They've been decent, but not great. And Pitt's got something going with them with Quadre Olison running the ball and getting the jet sweeps as well that they like to use to confuse the defense. I think this is a little bit of a mismatch. But I think Texas A&M's got a little more talent, and I think the mismatch keeps it close. So a close win for Texas A&M, even though they are going to be schematically outsmarted. It will be kind of like Ohio State, Maryland, not to that same extent. But the fact that the scheme is something that Texas A&M will never see, just like Ohio State has never seen with Maryland running a different scheme than they ever have against Ohio State. With A&M here, I lost my train of thought again. It's getting late. Moving on. I'm just going to move on. Nevada against Arkansas State. I think this is a decent game. Justice Hansen on one side, though, makes the difference in this ball game. I'm going to try to go quick here because I've been on for a while. Arkansas State to Justice Hansen makes this game a lot easier for Arkansas State. I think they win by 15 to 20 points. I wouldn't be surprised if Nevada pulls away. They got a very solid defense, which I've said that a lot, but Hansen is going to be the X factor in this game. Alabama, Michigan, we finally get to a semifinal. The Orange Bowl on the 29th, and this game is going to be very interesting to see. Tua Tagovailoa going up against this Michigan secondary and the defense, and I do think that Michigan's going to beat Ohio State on Saturday. David Long and Metellus, these guys in the secondary. If Winovich can get healthy, I think Michigan has a better shot. The odds of that happening, I don't know. Even if that happens, though, I would still have to put money on Bama just because it's Bama. And it's hard to go against them. So give me the Tide in this ball game. Like I said, X factor, though, is Chase Winovich, whether or not he's going to play. Notre Dame, Clemson, I think this is actually a more intriguing matchup. The more I see Notre Dame as of late, they look a lot better than I thought they were. But I think these are two teams that are going to be set up. And I don't think Notre Dame should be ranked behind Michigan, and neither should Clemson. But I feel like Michigan's a better team than both of these teams, and if they were to play in the semifinal, Michigan would win the matchup. With that being said, though, I got to go with Clemson's D front. I think this is going to be a low-scoring affair, very entertaining game if you like defense. And we'll see Notre Dame lose to Clemson in the teens, probably. It's going to be very low-scoring, and I got Clemson winning. Now we get out of the playoff, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some outside games that could be intriguing. And here's Stanford, Michigan State. Similar styles offensively, and a little less for Michigan State because they've gone a little bit away from that since Lewerke has taken the reins, but still a pro-style offense. Hayward has looked pretty good as of late, especially against Maryland, looked tremendous earlier in the year. But Stanford is going to try to make a statement. I don't know if Bryce Love's going to play, but Stanford's going to try to close out the season with a statement. KJ Costello has looked up and down the season. It'll be interesting to see what KJ Costello shows up. With that being said, I think the dominant run defense gets it done. I got Michigan State in a slugfest, 20-10. Look at me throwing scores out there. Cincinnati and Miami, I think this is a very interesting matchup with Michael Warren going up against his front seven. And I think they get it done. I think Cincinnati will actually slay Goliath here. Actually, now, I'm just thinking this in the top of my head. I'm going to go with Miami. They've looked better as of late with N'Kosi Perry at quarterback. Their weapons have started to come up big. They don't really have that Barrios factor that they've had in the past, but I can see Miami really being able to shut down Michael Warren in this. Oh gosh, I can't. Okay, let me rephrase it. I can see Michael Warren completely getting shut down in this matchup in the Military Bowl. Give me Miami. Texas Tech against Tennessee. I think these are two teams kind of in opposite paths. Even though Tennessee just got throttled against Missouri, I still feel like Tennessee is headed on the right direction, while Texas Tech late in the season, I think they will get a win this weekend. They beat Baylor, but I'm pretty sure the winner of that game will go. The winner of that game is coming to the Liberty Bowl to play Tennessee. And since I believe it's going to be Texas Tech, I'll just focus on Texas Tech. Jet Duffy is an explosive player, very fun to watch, but I think that they're trending in the downward spiral since that Oklahoma game. They've looked bad as of late. I think they get it done, put a little bit together defensively, but with that being said, I think Tennessee gets her done in the Liberty Bowl with home field advantage, basically, in their home state. Holiday Bowl, I think this is one of the more intriguing non-New Year's Six matchups we have. Iowa and Nathan Stanley kind of having an average year, a good year for Iowa, but really a year in which they could have easily been a contender in the West with a down year in the West. If they would have beat Northwestern and maybe won one other game, such as Purdue. They lost Purdue, Penn State, and Wisconsin. If they were in all three of those games, they could have won one of those games. They could possibly be the West champions. And I really like Iowa right now. However, Washington's very trendy, and they're starting to get back to the scene. Gaskins and Browning looking tremendous. These are both of those players last game. Neither one is really a super high draft prospect, so I expect them both to play. Give me Washington. Virginia and Missouri, I think this is another mismatch. I think Virginia's been heavily overrated all season. The front for Missouri has been better. Beckner is a very, very good prospect in the defensive tackle position, and they got a really good offensive line. Give me Missouri in 15 points in this ball game. Oregon and Boston College, A.J. Dillon against this defense and really against Justin Herbert. I'll be interested to see if Justin Herbert's going to play in the Hyundai Sun Bowl if this happens. If he does, Oregon wins this game easily. If not, it's a pretty close game. C.J. Verdell's a very solid back. He's kind of coming to fruition as of late. They got a lot of weapons outside, but if Herbert doesn't play, I'm going to go Boston College. But right now, it's going to be Oregon because I believe Herbert will end up playing. Kentucky in Wisconsin in the Outback Bowl. Jonathan Taylor maybe continues on this tear. The true sophomore at Wisconsin got another year left. It's crazy. Going up against a Kentucky team that's really struggled on the offensive side of the football. I'll be interested to see if Kentucky can stop the run attack. I think this is one of the rare occasions we're going to see an SEC team lose a game that they should win, but the lack of offense for Kentucky is very concerning for me. I want to say Wisconsin to win this ball game if they can figure out who's going to play quarterback, but man, Jonathan Taylor is a beast. Northwestern and Florida. This is just one of those games that might get ugly. I don't see Northwestern really competing here. I think Northwestern is going to get down on themselves. Clayton Thorson is going to be in his last game, though. Defense is going to stand up, and I think it's just going to be ugly, not as a blowout necessarily, but like a 20-3 game. It's going to be very low scoring, and Northwestern is going to have an inability to score. I expect Northwestern to lose this ball game against Florida. Penn State and Oklahoma. I think this is a great New Year's Six bowl game to keep an eye on. Oklahoma has an explosive offense, and when fully healthy, Penn State also has an explosive offense. I'll be very interested to see Kyler Murray go up against Trace McSorley in a classic showdown. But in the end, I got to say that the offense for Oklahoma will prevail because Penn State hasn't been playing great as of late, so give me Oklahoma. And like 7. Ohio State, Washington State. Oh, man, this is going to be a fun matchup, in my opinion. I think these are two quarterbacks that are tremendous, two offenses that can really get going. But I think the better defense wins in this ballgame, and that would be Washington State. Give me Washington State in about 6 points. Georgia, West Virginia is our final bowl game on the last day of bowls before we get to the College Football Playoff National Championship. And, man, this will also be a really fun one. I think it will be similar to the Oklahoma-Georgia matchup a year ago, and Georgia's going to prevail for the SEC, make a statement late, and I believe the SEC will win the national championship. I got Alabama winning College Football Playoff. Thank you guys for tuning in for my bowl projections here in Week 12. I will go over all the bowl games when they come out. I will make adjustments as I go along, see what happens this week, and also keep track and be live when bowls are getting announced on that Sunday after the college football or championship Sunday, I should say. Thank you again for tuning in. I will see you guys next time.